February 24, 2019. Stepping into Love. Neil Worthington. Licensed Unity teacher and spiritual leader at Unity of Payson, Arizona.
Charlie's title was about harmonizing, and I thought it was just wonderfully appropriate, because Betty did not know this, that I took that theme, the theme of self-love, and talked about, and chose a new title, Stepping into Love. And you talked about taking those steps that guidance gave you were right. Reverend Charlie didn't want to brave the ice to come over the mountain, and I think that's prudent. And so a couple days ago when we talked, she shared with me where she was going, and it kind of took me in a slightly different path, but using the same theme of self-love. So our title is Stepping into Self-Love. As soon as you know what the name of this story is, I'd like you to speak it out. I'm going to share a little story, which I'm sure probably everyone has heard before. There was a wealthy father who had 2 sons. Anybody know? Oh, see, it didn't take you long at all. And his home was full of life and joy and comfort that the sons enjoyed. But the younger son, really one who wanted to know and explore the world, very curious fellow, one day said, "Father, will you give me my inheritance, because I'd like to go it on hell." And the father did. And the son took the inheritance and went to a far country. That far country, it is told that he engaged in riotous living. He took that curiosity to the limit. Until there was a famine in the land, and he was reduced, having spent all of his inheritance, to feeding pigs. And then at one point, he came to himself. It says, "Even the servants back in my father's house have food and a warm place to sleep." And he changed direction and went back to his father's house, and was welcomed. His father saw him coming far off, and welcomed him without a shred of judgment with open arms. That's a story, but I'd like to give it just a little bit of a metaphysical twist this morning. And we're going to take some of the key points in that story and relate them to an inner meaning, something that we don't see in the words, but that we see in the truth of the story. First of all, the father's house, very poignant image, could be referred to as the kingdom of heaven, omnipresence. It's been spoken about, but I'd like to speak about it this morning as the center of our being. The touch point that says, I am the Father, I am the divine, I and everyone are one. I call that living consciously. So, the Father's house, living consciously. The younger son. Now, the younger son had a few things to learn in life. Had some catching up to do. Certainly hadn't even approached wisdom. So that younger son it was that went out in his curious way to explore life. And that younger son represents that in us that has some catching up to do, that needs some growth, that's looking quote of wisdom that is yet in the future. And he went to a far country, definitely away from conscious living, because conscious living was the Father's home. He left the Father's home, went to a far country, living consciously, you could say living unconsciously. And then he engaged in riotous living, straying even further from that conscious living, the values and the love that was there in the Father's home. One last thing. The Father seemed to be looking for that Son and saw him afar off. No judgment, not a shred of it, but welcoming love back to the Father's home, that place of living consciously. Living consciously is the place where we know ourselves as who we are. We love ourselves. And when it's not true of us that we are loving of ourselves, maybe we're a little bit on the other side of things, in the unconscious living, because the truth is that as expressions of the design, we are all that we could ever hope to be. We have all that we could ever hope to have. It's available to us. So the reason we don't experience that is that we have obstacles that come up to us. Obstacles that have led us to question our values, maybe to languish in, thank you, Terry, languish in a lack of self-esteem, just not to know the truth of ourselves. Some of those obstacles might be, we might have different ones that are on this list. I'm going to give you a few. The action of our peers. Peers can be really cruel. I had a couple of those when I was in grade school. And their taunts and their accusations led me to question myself. And then there was the authority figures in my life, my mother and my father primarily. They also made me question my value. You'll never get it right. You might have had something like that going, or son, you just have to knuckle down and work hard. You're worthless. As a child, I took those to heart. And that diminished my sense of value. That made me removed from what I was given coming into this earth and on this scene, the truth of being one with the divine, having all of the resources, being valued inestimably high. One of those obstacles might have been that you weren't taught to love yourself. Maybe you had those parents that didn't teach that, or maybe you didn't have a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle that really taught you self-love. Or you might have had some deficiency in your life, or some situation or some trauma that kept you from knowing self-love. So those are the obstacles, but the opportunities that go with them, let's go right to that. Let's not stick around in the obstacles too long, because the obstacles are opportunities. The action of our peers gave us the opportunity to rediscover who we really are. Now, most of us didn't do that as children, maybe. I didn't. But as adults, at whatever point we are chronologically or on our journey, we have the opportunity to rediscover who we are. What an opportunity. If we had authority figures that didn't serve us well, we are creatures of choice. We get to choose who those mentors will be for us, who those are that will lead the way. And it could have been that uncle or aunt, and maybe you had that. But it could be someone in your life that gives you some sense of spiritual direction, some sense of spiritual worth and understanding. You get to choose. The opportunity is to choose your mentor. You weren't taught to love yourself. No excuses about that. It's never too late. There are endless opportunities to learn if you intend to find them. Great opportunity. And then finally, that trauma. I'm going to speak about trauma. I want to put it down and talk a little bit about this. It really is helpful. We're talking about beyond or above PTSD, a word we didn't even know when I was a child, or an acronym. So that trauma that affects us today, that triggers us and lives itself out in our life, if we allow it to. There are ways that the opportunity in this is to choose that centering. But going back into psychological terms, how about grounding? Taking the opportunity to ground. And I'm going to give you just a couple of ways that we can do that. I'm going to parallel it with that centeredness that we talked about. When that trauma comes up, you're in the fight, flight, freeze mode. But you can choose to ground. You can do what we just did when we were in our meditation. You can breathe deeply all the way. What that'll do, as well as the other tools, will be that sympathetic nervous system that hooks up with that trauma, that just keeps it going and going, can be bypassed with that grounding. 2 minutes even of grounding, breathing, or perhaps immunity affirmations. Taking 2 minutes to spend time with the affirmation that really is pulling to you. Or 2 minutes to recite slogans that you may have learned in a 12-step program. Just taking yourself out of that sympathetic, nervous response by choosing to ground or center yourself. The obstacles can be opportunities. So what about self-acceptance, critical to self-love? We'll look at the prodigal son again, who came to terms with the situation. Here I am, for whatever reason, not making excuses. I'm speaking for the prodigal son. I like to think this is what he said. Not making excuses for it. I'm here eating the husks that the pigs are eating. I'm cold and hungry. I'm here. I'm going home. Don't know how I'm going to be received, but I'm here. I accept where I am right now, awful though it may be. And then it's also getting an inkling of the truth that you experienced somewhere back at home, remembering who you are. So, can we look to who we are? Those times when we really knew who we are, we really knew that we are a child of God, or an expression of the divine, however you choose to term it, remembering who you are. So, acceptance. And finally, withholding judgment of you, of yourself. Judgment can be a killer. And when we can back away from it, we have an opportunity to accept and to love ourselves again. If the judgment keeps going, there's a little chance you can do that. So how do you do that? Deepak Chopra said, well, get up in the morning and say, I'm not going to judge anything today. Well, that's nice words, but I find I did judge things anyway. But it was helpful to start with that intention not to judge, and then to move on to catch myself. And then I found myself judging. That's how you do it. Intended. Catch yourself. Change your course. Self-acceptance. Very important part of self-love. We bring ourselves to loving who we are. The negative feelings that we have, the unmet needs that we have, the positive feelings that we don't recognize or don't claim. How many of you were taught to not feel good about yourself all that much? If you felt great that you really had accomplished something, I don't want to be prideful now. Oops, sorry about that. I don't want to be prideful. I certainly don't want to claim it too loudly. Somebody will think back at me. How about saying, I did it! I'm proud of myself. I'm pretty special. I did it. Loving yourself might encourage you to engage in some of that. Love the deficiencies in your life. Sometimes we look at the small picture and we only see that little hard and fast event or situation that's in our life. And we don't know that we don't remember that there's a bigger picture than that. And the bigger picture, when seen clearly, is going to allow us to know that all is well. That we're not abandoned. That our destiny is greater than our current situation. Remember that. And then whatever traumas you may have experienced, don't let them rule your life. Love yourself. Take that time that we spoke about. Take that 2 minutes to ground and center and remember who you are. You, in fact, are the perfect you. One last thing. How about self-compassion? In the right place. This is a paraphrase of a quote that comes from psychology, kind of mixed up with Buddhism a little bit. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with kindness, concern, and support when faced with difficult life struggles or confronting personal mistakes, doubts, or fears. Self-compassion responds with kindness rather than harsh self-judgment, recognizing that all of us are engaged in a shared human experience. There are 3 aspects I'll go through just briefly of self-compassion. This is very Buddhist. Mindfulness. I had this little book that I put in my pocket and put all sorts of things on it. If when we get done with these 3 aspects of self-compassion and a few words that I've put together to go with them, if you want them, sign my book. Put your name in my book and I will read them. Don't have to hand out to you. Mindfulness. Here's what mindfulness is. Having an open, curious, non-judging attitude and not identifying with negative stories about yourself. 2, self-kindness. Treating yourself kindly rather than harshly. Extending the same care and support to yourself that you would to a good friend or loved one. And 3, common humanity. Allowing yourself to be human, to make mistakes and learn from them, knowing that as humans we are not perfect, nor should we be expected to act flawlessly. 3 aspects of self-love. And I encourage you to carry on and investigate those and how they may be brought to play in your life. Let me close with, remember this? What's the greatest commandment, they asked Jesus? And of course the answer was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But the second commandment is like it. Love your neighbor. And I want to emphasize these last two words. As yourself. It's like that commandment, the prerequisite is to love yourself. If you would move forward anyway, if you would step up in consciousness for the self-love. First of all, it's a prerequisite to real authentic love. And secondly, you may find that as you grow in self-love, loving others will be so much easier. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so it is.